I once thought time could bury everything, until one night, the past clawed its way out of the grave, wearing the face of the man I had loved and believed dead. 10 years of running turned to ash the moment those eyes found me again. And from that instant on, fate never allowed me another moment of peace.
Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below.
My name is Grace. I'm 35 years old, and what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. The siren of the ambulance tore through the Seattle night, while inside the cabin, the air was thick, dense as a deep pool. I sat across from the empty stretcher, my nitrile gloves whispering every time my fingers brushed together. The monitor cast a pale blue glow across my face. Heart rate 74, oxygen 98, numbers steady to the point of indifference. If someone had placed electrodes on my chest at that moment, the ECG line would have been just a thin, weary thread crawling across the screen. The radio crackled. Code red, the Langford estate, suspected anaphylactic shock, emergency response. I looked at Rosa. She nodded. I nodded. The kind of nod that felt as habitual as buckling a seatbelt. The Langford estate, a name that sounded of polished wood, shining silver, and aged wine. I'd never been there, but I could already imagine the kind of tragedy that unfolded in such a place. Clean, fragrant, and still politely contained. The tires crunched on the cobblestone drive. When the rear doors swung open, the world flooded in. A waltz still echoing faintly, silk skirts sweeping the floor, someone shouting, "Call 911!" and the scent of expensive perfume tangled with panic. Beneath a chandelier, a man lay on his back, lips blue, tuxedo collar torn, tie hanging loose like a flag at half-mast. I knelt. EpiPen. Rosa placed it in my hand. The needle pierced through the fabric. The medication rushed in. I counted his breaths. Everything followed protocol, the only kind of order keeping me from falling apart. His chest lifted. A cough broke free. The crowd exhaled in relief, and a few awkward claps rang out like glasses clinking together. I looked up and froze. The groom, Lucas Langford. The way he stood, the tilt of his head, those deep brown eyes, all framed a memory I had carried through my youth. And beneath his left eye, a tiny crescent-shaped scar. I felt my blood drain like the tide retreating. The hand holding the syringe trembled so hard I nearly dropped the saline bag. Ethan Cole. The name struck like a bell, releasing a summer long buried. Laughter, heat, the sound of a concert ticket tearing, half his, half mine. Years later, I'd tried pressing the halves together, their edges fitting perfectly, painfully perfect. Grace? Rosa's voice plucked the air like a string. I'm fine, I said, but my throat was paper dry. The sounds around us swelled, heels clicking, flowers falling, someone's ragged breathing, and I sank. Lucas stepped closer. The crowd parted like receding tidewater. At that distance, I could see the faint stubble along his chin, smell the blend of cologne and whiskey, watch a bead of sweat trace the exact path I once knew on another face. He stopped in front of me, his gaze not arrogant, only searching, for an answer to a question that didn't yet have a place to land. I'm sorry, he said, voice rough with too many emotions. Do I know you? The music stopped, abruptly, as if someone had pulled the plug. The silence stretched absurdly long, long enough for my stomach to twist, short enough that I couldn't rebuild the walls in time. Part of me wanted to say no. 3 letters to seal the door, but my mouth wouldn't move. I looked into his eyes and saw something both familiar and foreign, like standing before an old house freshly painted, yet with the same foundation underneath. Rosa squeezed my elbow. We need to transport the patient. I nodded. The mechanical gesture of someone backing away from the edge. I gathered the gear, the zipper's closing hiss a heavy underline, and slipped through the crowd. As I passed, I caught sight of the bride, eyes red, hand clutching her chest as if to keep her heart from falling out. She didn't look at me. She looked at Lucas, with the fear of someone about to lose what was hers, without yet knowing why. Outside, the air was cold and dry. My breath hit the night and broke into mist. I leaned against the ambulance door, the metal biting through my uniform. Inside me, something unlatched. Not a bleeding wound, but a wooden box long buried. In the reflection of the glass, I saw my own face, pale as paper, hair clinging damp to my temples, eyes haunted like someone who had just brushed against a ghost. But it wasn't a ghost. It was a man who shouldn't exist. And his question, "Do I know you?" rang like a bell that refused to stop. I climbed into the ambulance. Rosa didn't ask. Her silence was a kind of rescue. We shut the doors, cutting off the world of chandeliers and ribbons. The city lights streaked backward like strokes of a long brush against glass. In the hum of the engine, memory surfaced piece by piece. The night flames devoured a house, the sky red as an overturned bowl of fire, the smell of plastic and burnt hair, the silence after collapse, the charred ring I'd picked up with trembling hands. The name of the one who was gone, Ethan, rolled off my tongue like a prayer no one would answer. At the hospital, I handed off the patient, signed, nodded, walked away. All movements I could perform in my sleep. By the vending machine, I stood for a long time, not thirsty, just needing to look at something solid, something that stayed where it was supposed to be. My phone lit up. Shift schedules, stray notifications. The past doesn't text. It only borrows a new face to reappear, then asks you a simple question, in the voice of the dead. I pressed my forehead to the glass. The chill cleared my thoughts like a mirror wiped clean of fog. For a second I saw the wedding hall again. Shards of glass, a glint across the syringe, the sweat following its familiar path. Lucas's question fell once more, light as snow, burning as coal. I knew I wouldn't sleep tonight. Once a door opens, it never closes the same way again. I had gone far to escape, but memory has legs. It wears a tuxedo, ties a bow, and stands before you at a ceremony you were never invited to. And I knew something solid as my own name. Ethan hadn't vanished entirely. At least, not from that face. Near dawn, the sky bruised gray. I walked to the parking lot, heels striking the wet pavement, realizing my hands were still trembling. Not from fatigue, but from brushing against an old seal. Inside the car, I sat still, hand over my collarbone, a habit to remind myself, I'm still here. Then I started the engine. Rain began to fall, the drops dragging long streaks down the windshield like someone trying to rewrite a smeared letter. I didn't know what I'd do in the morning, only that I couldn't pretend anymore. Not after that scar beneath his left eye. Not after that gaze. Not after that question. Somewhere, people were cleaning the wedding hall, changing the bulbs, picking up fallen petals. The city would pretend nothing had broken. I used to be good at pretending. Not tonight. I merged into the thinning traffic, turned the radio low to hear myself think. A voice inside me, quiet, unyielding, spoke. It's time to return to the sealed door. If the man was Lucas and not Ethan, I'd go through Lucas to reach what was left of him, one way or another. Some wounds are tunnels. The only way to know where they lead is to step inside. And just when I thought I could breathe again, the memory from the hall returned, sharp as a freshly honed blade. Lucas standing before me, his eyes holding something both strange and known, his lips parting, the words falling. I'm sorry, he whispered, as if afraid to break something fragile between us. Do I know you? The next morning, I woke as if still trapped inside that wedding hall, the blinding gold light, the sound of shattering glass, and Lucas's face, Ethan's face, drifting before me like a wisp of smoke. Cold water stung my skin but couldn't wash away the tremor in my wrists. In the mirror, the dark circles under my eyes betrayed a night without a single minute of rest. I arrived at the station early, sinking into the thick smell of coffee as if to hold on to something solid. Rosa glanced at me and frowned. "You look like you just fought a ghost." "Maybe the ghost won," I said, forcing a smile. The emergency alarm blared and we sped off. A minor accident at a bus stop, then a severe asthma attack, followed by an elderly man with low blood pressure. The everyday beep-beep that usually eased me into rhythm now felt like needles pricking my skin. The colors of the patients changed, the faces changed, but through them all, I still saw him. The crescent scar, the quiet brown eyes, the clipped question, "Do I know you?" By the fourth call, I held the syringe backward. Rosa grabbed my wrist, her voice sharp but controlled. "Grace, what are you doing?" Cold sweat shot down my spine. I turned away, breathing deep, hearing my heart beat like something fleeing. "Sorry," I said. "I'll focus." Rosa didn't scold me. She only looked for a long moment, as if trying to pull back someone drifting too far from shore. The shift passed without more mistakes, but I felt hollow, like an empty box. I stood in the hallway, inhaling the sterile scent, when suddenly a voice from long ago surfaced in my head. Ethan's. Soft and devastating. "Don't let them make you forget me." I blinked. The white wall was just a wall. No one was there. Only my memory, newly unsealed. After my shift, I returned to my small apartment. The bottom drawer held a faded wooden box, the archive of what I'd buried. I laid everything on the table, washed out photographs, a few old notes, half of a torn concert ticket. I pulled the other half from my wallet and fit them together. The jagged edges aligned perfectly, so perfect my chest tightened as if caught in a too hard embrace. I picked up Ethan's photograph. Dark t-shirt, slightly crooked smile, that small crescent scar visible at his neck. The resemblance to Lucas was merciless. I opened my laptop and typed, "Lucas Langford." Dozens of articles appeared. Lavish wedding photos with Olivia, daughter of Charles Langford, charity projects, polished quotes that read like advertising copy. CEO of North Haven Suites, the Golden Man. In one side profile image, I zoomed in. Beneath his left earlobe was a faint birthmark, exactly where I used to touch on Ethan's skin. The spot he joked was the moon's ink mark. I blinked. When coincidences pile up enough, they stop being coincidences. 3 sharp knocks. The door swung open before I could say come in. A silver-haired man in a gray suit stood between 2 bodyguards. I didn't need an introduction. "Charles Langford." "You're Grace Turner?" "Yes." "You were the medic last night at the Langford estate. You disrupted my daughter's wedding." His eyes scanned the room as if taking inventory, cold and cutting. "I saved a man from anaphylactic shock," I said evenly. "In my house, people save lives with professionalism and with decorum." His mouth twitched. "I'm only here to say this. Stay away from Lucas. No calls, no messages, no chance meetings." "You're mistaken." I'm never mistaken," he interrupted, voice flat as steel. "Don't make yourself an enemy of the Langford family." He turned. The guards opened the door. As he passed, his gaze flicked over the box on my table, the torn ticket half peeking out, as if recognizing the most fragile thing I owned. The door shut, leaving a silence so sharp it hummed. I stood motionless for a few beats before collapsing into the chair. What I felt wasn't fear. It was anger. Anger at the threat that thought it could erase a name already carved into my bones. I dug deeper into the box and found a photo I'd never examined closely. Ethan, beside an older woman with silver hair, deep eyes, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. In the corner, faint blue ink read, Spokane, April 1995. The slanted light made the crescent scar on his neck gleam like a symbol. Spokane. The city Ethan mentioned only once, then fell silent. I was born in Spokane. There's nothing left there for me. I hadn't asked more. When you're young, you think love means not needing answers. Only after losing someone do you learn that truth is the only thing strong enough to resist fading. I spread everything across the table like a patched map. The half ticket, the Spokane photo, the note fragments, a firefighter's button. In the middle, a blank space shaped exactly like a question. If Ethan died, then who was living with his face? Outside, the rain fell steady as a curtain. Streetlights bled like ink on wet paper. I placed my finger over the scar in the photo. The paper's chill touched my skin, yet warmth, old, buried warmth, ran up my spine. The phone vibrated. Unknown number. I let it ring until it stopped. If it was one of Charles's men, I didn't want to hear. If it was Lucas, I wasn't ready. I only wanted one sound now. The sound of my heart calling the name that refused to stay buried. Rosa texted, I can cover your shift tomorrow. You need rest. I replied, okay. She sent back a coffee cup emoji. On the other side of that screen was a friend trying to keep me afloat. But I knew I would still dive, because at the bottom lay what I'd lost. I opened Lucas's photos again, his chin shadowed, his eyes drifting past someone's shoulder. In another shot, he smiled at Olivia, the perfect smile of a man who'd learned how to smile for the camera. But at the corners of his eyes, I saw a dry weariness. A person can act so well he forgets who he used to be. Wind slipped through the door crack, carrying the scent of pastries from the bakery below. I murmured, half bitter, half rye, sugar and butter on one end, smoke and ash on the other, and in between, one face standing like a bridge. I closed the box. The lid scraped the wood with a sound too final for a mere pause. I turned off the main light, leaving only the desk lamp. Its golden glow pooled like warm honey. On the table, the Spokane photo lay still. I leaned close, feeling my heartbeat slow. A thought rose, calm, firm. I will not let anyone silence my past. If Lucas isn't Ethan, then he is the key to what remains of him. I will search. I will ask. I will drag the truth into the light, even if it tears me apart again. I pressed my fingertip to the scar in the photograph, whispering like a vow. It's you. I will find the truth. Outside, the rain thickened. A droplet slid from the eaves, landing on the edge of the photo, spreading into a small crescent-shaped stain. I smiled, thin, resolute, and switched off the lamp. The room fell into darkness, but in that darkness, a door softly clicked open. 2 days after meeting Charles Langford, I still hadn't slept through a single night. The Seattle rain kept falling endlessly, as if the city itself were trying to wash away something only I knew. Coffee had become the blood in my veins, and the sound of a patient's ventilator echoed in my head whenever I tried to rest. But what kept me awake wasn't work. It was Lucas, the man who wore Ethan's face, with eyes that had no idea who I was. I tried to convince myself it was just coincidence, but reason was too frail against what the heart remembered. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, standing in smoke or in rain, looking at me as if he'd lost something he couldn't remember ever having. On Tuesday morning, my phone rang. An unknown number flashed on the screen. I hesitated for a few seconds, then answered. Ms. Turner? A man's voice, deep, precise, so familiar it froze my neck. Yes? Who is this? Lucas Langford. I froze. How did you get my number? I asked someone to find it. I have a few questions, he said, hesitating, his voice dropping lower. About the man in the photograph you sent me. My breath caught halfway through my chest. When do you want to meet? As soon as possible. The North Haven Suites building stood in the city's heart, glass and steel gleaming beneath the rain. I stopped the car, stared at my reflection on the mirrored facade, and felt like I was looking at another woman. Wet coat, loose hair, dark circles under her eyes. I took a deep breath and walked inside. The air smelled faintly of caramel and vanilla, sweet enough to make me sick. The receptionist sent me to the 18th floor. When the elevator doors opened, he was standing there, white shirt, hands in pockets, the light glinting off his dark brown eyes. For an instant, I saw Ethan again. "Thank you for coming," Lucas said, his tone cool but polite. "I just wanted to clear things up." I followed him into his office, a dark wooden desk, wedding photographs on the walls. Everything immaculate. In that flawless room, I felt like a scratch across polished glass. "Have you seen the picture?" I asked, laying down the photo of Ethan standing beside the silver-haired woman. Lucas looked down, his eyes darkened. "I've seen it," he said. "She looks like my mother." The words made my skin crawl. "And what do you think?" "I think you're mistaken. I don't have any siblings. I'm an only child." I gave a thin smile. "Then why do you have the same scar as Ethan Cole? Under your left eye? The same birthmark beneath your ear? And the same face I kissed for 2 years?" Lucas stepped back half a pace, his gaze wavering. Then he forced his voice to harden. "You're saying something insane." "No." I moved closer, lowering my tone. "Have you ever dreamed of someone whose face you couldn't see, but felt like you'd been someone else before?" He was silent. I could hear the rain striking the windows, each drop tapping against whatever he was trying to hide. Finally, he spoke, softly, like a confession. "Sometimes I see a woman in my dreams. I can't see her face clearly. I only remember that she calls me by another name." My hands clenched. "What name does she call you?" He closed his eyes. "Ethan." The air in the room vanished. I stepped back, afraid that if I stayed closer, I'd start crying. Lucas opened his eyes, forcing a smile. "It must be exhaustion. Everyone has strange dreams." "You're not dreaming, Lucas. That's memory," I said. "And maybe you've been living your whole life inside a lie." He was silent, turning toward the window. Rain slid down behind him, long and silver like threads of light. "Do you know what you're suggesting? If what you say is true, then my parents—" "No," I interrupted. "Not your father. Your mother. She's the only one who can explain this." He turned back, eyes unfocused. "Margaret, my mother never lies." "Everyone lies," I said quietly, "especially to protect what they fear losing most." The air thickened. I heard the clock ticking, second by second. Lucas rubbed his forehead, then said slowly, "If you're right, I need to know. I'll ask her. But I need time." "I'll wait," I said, my voice softening. "No one can face the truth all at once, but you have to be brave enough to look it in the eye." He nodded, staring out at the rain, whispering, "I've always felt like someone forgot me. Maybe I'm not the one who was forgotten." As I was leaving, he called after me. "Ms. Turner?" "Yes?" "If you have more photos or anything that belonged to Ethan, could you show me?" I nodded. "Only if you truly want to know who you are?" His gaze lingered on me longer than it should have, as if trying to say something he couldn't. Then he turned away. That evening, I returned to my apartment. It was still raining. I boiled water, made tea, but the steam only stung my eyes. I opened my laptop and pulled up Lucas's wedding photos. Close-up shots of his face. Under the lights, the crescent-shaped scar stood out clearly. I took a screenshot, zoomed in. No mistake. I placed Ethan's old photo beside the screen. 2 faces, 2 lives, but the same eyes that knew how to stay silent. The line between past and present was dissolving, fading like breath on glass. The phone vibrated. Lucas Langford. I answered, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. "Did you find something?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just spoke with my mother." His voice deepened, breaking like someone struggling against his own words. "Can you listen to this?" I held my breath. "She denied it?" Silence. Then softly, "She cried." A long pause. I could hear the rain outside like the sound of a strangled heartbeat. "She said I'm not an only child," Lucas continued. "She said my name used to be Ethan." The words dropped like a stone into water. Every memory in me rippled, collided, blurred. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Ethan," I whispered. His voice came rough, trembling. "I don't remember anything, only this feeling, like half my life is missing. You were right. He existed, and I need you to help me find the rest of me." The rain slammed harder against the windows, as if the whole city were listening. I wanted to speak, but my throat locked. Part of me felt joy, the other, terror, because I knew, from this moment on, nothing could ever go back to the way it was. The phone slipped from my hand, landing softly on the tile. I folded over, clutching my head. Ethan had survived, or at least a part of him lived on inside that man. Either way, the wound I'd carried for 10 years had begun to bleed again. I lifted my head and looked out the window, fogged with condensation. The city lights stretched into long streaks, blurred like tears. Inside me, a voice rose. Ethan's or Lucas's, I couldn't tell anymore. "We will find each other again, no matter the lifetime." I had thought that the phone call that night was just a late dream. But in the morning, when the first light slipped through the curtains, my phone still displayed a message from Lucas. 9 a.m. I need you. My mother will tell everything. I read that message again and again until I could recite every period, every pause. In my life, I had heard many cries for help. From the dying, from their families, from patients whose names I could no longer remember. But this was the first plea I'd ever seen stripped so bare. The rain had not stopped all morning. I drove through misty streets, my palms slick with sweat. The closer I got to the Langford estate, the harder my heart pounded, as if an invisible door was about to open, and I couldn't tell whether light or darkness waited behind it. Margaret Langford's house stood alone on View Ridge Hill. Dark roof tiles, tall iron gates, every detail emanating the silence of someone too accustomed to power. The gate was already open. Lucas was waiting on the steps, no coat, rain soaking his hair, droplets running down the collar of his shirt. "You told her?" I asked. "Yes. She wants to meet you." His voice was hoarse, his eyes hollow. I could tell he hadn't slept. Like me. We went inside. The living room was wide, full of light, yet cold as a hospital ward. Everything in the house was too perfect to be comforting. The teacups aligned precisely, the paintings hung at flawless angles, as if the slightest deviation could make the whole world collapse. Mrs. Margaret Langford sat at the head of a long table, her posture straight, her expression composed, like someone who had prepared a story long before it had to be told. When I approached, she studied me from head to toe, her gaze sharp and measured. "You are Grace Turner?" she asked evenly, without emotion. "Yes, ma'am. You believe my son is someone else?" I took a deep breath. "No, I don't believe. I know." Lucas stood beside me, fingers intertwined. He avoided both our eyes. I'm not here to cause trouble, I continued. I just want to understand why he exists under two names, Ethan Cole and Lucas Langford. Margaret's hands gripped the armrests tightly. What you're saying is absurd. No one in my family has ever had such a name. Really? I pulled an old photograph from my bag. Ethan standing beside a silver-haired woman with the words, Spokane, April 1995, written on the corner. I set it on the table in front of her. That's you, isn't it? The room froze. She looked down at the photo, and in that instant, her entire face changed. The composure cracked. Her lips trembled. Her eyes widened as if she were staring at the ghost of herself. Lucas stepped forward, his voice breaking. Mother, what is this? Who's in the picture? She was silent for a long time, then finally exhaled, a sound like air escaping a wall that had been held too long under pressure. It's me, Lucas, and I exchanged a look. That short answer hit like a spark thrown into a room filled with gas. Then who is Ethan Cole? I asked. She bowed her head, hands clasped tightly in her lap. When she looked up again, her voice was rough. Ethan Cole was the name of the son I lost. The silence was so deep I could hear the clock ticking. Lost? Lucas echoed, voice cracking. What do you mean, lost? I mean, I couldn't save both of you, she said slowly, cutting each word apart. You were twins. The night of the fire, I could only carry one child out of the flames. Your father? He couldn't bear to think the other had died. So he chose half of the truth. He changed the name, the life, even the memory. Lucas staggered back, his hands shaking. I was a twin? Yes. Ethan and Lucas. She wept. I never knew which one I carried out of the fire. The doctors said the baby suffered burns, that the memory might never be whole. We only kept one child. I was stunned. Part of me wanted to embrace her. Another part wanted to scream. I looked at Lucas. He stood in the middle of the room as if gravity had abandoned him. You lied to me all these years? He whispered. You let me live under someone else's name? I only wanted you to live, she cried. Every time I looked at you, I saw Ethan. How could I bear it? Lucas turned away, clutching his head. I dreamed about her. About a girl. A child. About smoke and fire. Do you know why, Mother? Because those memories never died. They were only locked away. Margaret slumped in her chair. I thought if I buried the past deep enough, it would die with it. But I was wrong. I stepped forward and gently placed my hand on Lucas's shoulder. He looked at me, his eyes weary but clearer than ever. See? He murmured. The part I was missing was the truth itself. I nodded. Sometimes loss is just the universe's way of forcing us to find ourselves again. Margaret wiped her tears, her voice breaking. I know no apology will ever be enough, but I hope someday you can forgive me. Lucas stood silent for a long time. Then he stepped closer, leaned down, and took her hands. You don't need my forgiveness, Mother. Just let me finally be who I am. She pulled him into her arms, tears soaking through his white shirt. I watched them, my heart tightening, a feeling caught between relief and pain. Outside, the rain grew heavier, drumming against the windows like the heartbeat of three people breathing the same air. When we left the house, Lucas walked beside me in silence. The street was slick, lights reflecting on puddles like spilled ink. What will you do now? I asked. Find him. Ethan? Yes. If I was once Ethan, then somewhere there's still something of him I need to understand. I nodded, knowing this was only the beginning. But for the first time, there was determination in his voice, the sound of a man waking from a long dream. Before getting into his car, he turned to me and said quietly, Thank you, Grace. Without you, I would have spent my whole life inside someone else's story. I gave a faint smile. Now you know why I could never forget you, don't you? He looked at me, and for the first time, his eyes held not just confusion, but faith. Fragile, yet real. That night, when I got home, it was raining again. I opened the envelope Margaret had handed me before we left. Inside were copies of hospital records, a few old photographs, and a letter never sent, addressed to Ethan Cole. The handwriting slanted and soft. My son, if you're still alive, I hope you can forgive me. I didn't have the courage to keep both of you, so I held on to the lesser pain. But blood always knows its way back to the heart, and I believe, sooner or later, you will find each other again. I read the letter over and over until the ink blurred through my tears. The window was ajar. Wind carried the distant wail of an ambulance. I looked outside, rain still falling as if the world were weeping with someone. That night, I knew. An old chapter had closed. And the truth, however painful, is always the beginning of something real. After that morning, I no longer looked at the world with the same eyes. Everything around me seemed stripped of its familiar casing. The lights, the sirens, even the city's breath took on a different tone, both relieved and uneasy. Perhaps when the truth is exposed, it never only frees you. It also leaves a tear, forcing you to live with the part that keeps bleeding. Lucas called me that afternoon, his voice still hoarse but clearer. I need to see you. There's something I can't do on my own. I went to a small cafe in Capitol Hill where two people sat in a hidden corner and light filtered through a frosted window. When I walked in, he was already there, his hand resting on the envelope his mother had given him the day before. His eyes were ringed with shadows, but something had changed. His gaze was no longer that of a haunted man, but of someone waking up. "Have you read her letter?" I asked. He nodded. "And you?" "Yes." We fell silent. We both knew there were no words that could fill the gaps time had left behind. At last, he said, "I want to find the rest of Ethan. Maybe he really did die, but if he once lived, there must be traces. Friends, hospitals, records, anything." "We'll look," I said without hesitation. "I know someone who can do that." That evening, I met with Jack Harlan, a private detective who'd helped me once in a missing persons case at the hospital. He's the kind of man who doesn't say much, but every word lands like a stake in the ground. When I sketched out the story, Jack only lifted an eyebrow. "Two identities? One face? Are we talking identity fraud or swapped records?" "Either is possible," I replied. "But here we have a fire and a child who was switched. I just need to know where Ethan Cole lived after that." Jack nodded and pulled out a leather notebook. "Give me 2 days. If anyone on earth was ever Ethan Cole, I'll find him." Those 2 waiting days crawled slower than a long year. Lucas and I were almost never apart. He took time off work, and I switched shifts. We worked out of my apartment, a small place, but enough for 2 lost souls to take shelter. Files and maps were spread across the table. I watched Lucas bend over each line, his lips pressed tight whenever a detail gripped his heart. "I used to think I hated the past," he said, "but it turns out what I fear is not having one." I smiled faintly. The past doesn't disappear. It just waits for the right moment to claim what it's owed. One evening, while we were going through the documents again, he asked, "What was Ethan like?" I took a few seconds to answer. How do you fold a whole person into a few sentences? In the end, I told the truth. He had a way of looking at things that made people believe the world could still be good. And when he smiled, I felt like nothing wicked could last very long. Lucas went quiet. He looked down at the photo of Ethan in a firefighter's uniform. He was brave. So are you, I said, only in a different way. You're brave enough to go and find yourself. Between us, the silence hung like a thin, warm thread. There were moments when I glanced over and couldn't tell who I was talking to, Lucas or Ethan, or both of them woven into one. That night, we stayed up. The coffee went cold, the lamp cast a warm wash across the wall, the rain tapped against the glass. No one said another word, but when I finally nodded off at the table, he gently draped his jacket over me. I caught only half a smile in the dark, a smile so familiar it hurt. The next morning, Jack Harlan called. I've got what you need. Ethan Cole did not die in that fire. The records were altered. His real name was changed to protect his identity. He was transferred to Spokane in 2016 and made a living as a stunt rider. I held my breath. Lucas stood beside me, eyes wide. He was alive? He whispered. He was, Jack said. But I'm afraid, not for long. According to the file, Ethan Cole died in a motorcycle accident last year. I felt my heart hit the floor. Lucas stepped back, his hand gripping the chair. Neither of us could speak. Jack paused, then continued. However, he had a daughter, 3 years old. Her name is Lily Cole. She's currently in Washington State's foster care system. The air froze. A daughter? Lucas repeated, his voice catching. Ethan had a child? I nodded, my throat tight. I didn't know what to feel. Joy, pain, or fear. Because it meant that a part of Ethan was still in this world. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark, listening to the wind howl past the eaves, thinking of the little girl named Lily, a 3-year-old without parents, bearing the surname Cole, the name of the man I loved, and of the man sleeping in my room. Lucas came out, hair tousled, t-shirt rumpled. He sat beside me and handed me a glass of water. You're not sleeping? No. And you? I can't. He looked at me, his gaze touching somewhere deeper than memory. Do you think this is the universe's way of returning what we lost? Maybe. I smiled faintly, but every gift comes with a trial. Lucas gave a pained little laugh. I never thought I could have a family, but if Lily really is Ethan's daughter, then I'm her uncle. Not just her uncle, I said. You're the only one she has left. We were quiet for a long time. In that moment, I saw something light up in his eyes. Not the light of pain, but the first spark of faith after years buried under lies. We'll find her, I said. Yeah, he answered. And this time, I'm not leaving anyone behind. Outside, dawn was starting to break. Pale light brushed the window and fell across the table cluttered with papers, records, and overlapping lives. A new morning, a new beginning. I looked at Lucas, the man who wore Ethan's face, carried another's spirit, and now held his own resolve in his chest. He gently took my hand without a word. That light hold was enough to tell me we were stepping into the next part together. The part where no one knew the ending, only that no one would be alone. That night when I was alone, I wrote in my journal, Ethan, if you can see this, know that we are coming to find you. Not to rewrite the past, but to give it a place to rest. Lucas is learning to live true to his own name, and I'm learning to believe in the impossible, that sometimes true love doesn't die, it only changes shape. We set out for Spokane on a bleak February morning. The road stretched gray and long, old patches of snow lingering by the roadside like forgotten memories. I sat in the passenger seat, watching the second hand creep slowly forward, while Lucas gripped the steering wheel tightly. Neither of us spoke for the first 3 hours. There are silences that words can't break. Silences heavy with fear, but also holding a fragile faith that when you arrive, something will have changed. Jack Harlan had arranged to meet us at a small diner on the outskirts of Spokane. When we arrived, he was already there, holding a cup of black coffee, his face even grimmer than usual. I checked the hospital files, police records, and the stunt registry, he began in his steady voice. Ethan Cole didn't just survive. He became well known in the stunt riding circuit for a while. He went by the name E.C. Blaze. Lucas lifted his head, his eyes lighting up, the kind of light that belongs to someone pulled back from the edge. He was alive. Truly alive, he said, and gave a small, disbelieving laugh, like a child finding a long-lost toy. I looked at him and saw his shoulders trembling. In that look, I saw Ethan again, the way he used to smile when he promised, "We'll survive every fire." Jack went on. He performed with a troupe called Iron Flame for 3 years, but the sentence hung unfinished. My heart sank. But what? Lucas asked, his voice shaking. A year ago, during a show in Portland, his bike exploded midair. The papers called it a professional accident, but no one in the troupe ever claimed the body. I clenched my fists. No body? None. The police concluded it was burned beyond recognition. But there's something odd. The blood test didn't match the blood type listed in Ethan's childhood medical records. Lucas exhaled sharply, a frown forming between his brows. You're saying there's a chance he's still alive? I'm not saying that for sure, Jack replied. But 1 month after the explosion, a woman named Mara Cole filed to place her 3-year-old daughter in Washington State's foster system. Then she vanished. The air seemed to thicken around us. Lucas looked at me, eyes shining with disbelief and something fragile. Hope. Lily, I whispered. She's proof that Ethan lived, loved, and left something behind in this world. Lucas nodded slowly, leaning forward, his head in his hand. He went further than I ever did. And you know something? Sometimes I wish I'd been the one to die in that fire, so Ethan could live his life whole. I reached for his hand. Don't say that. You survived to carry the rest of him forward. That's why you're still here. Evening fell fast, the dim light washing over the old brick buildings. We followed the address Jack had given us to the apartment Ethan once rented. The landlady, an elderly woman, looked at us with cautious curiosity. Ethan? She repeated, then gave a wistful smile. He was a good boy. Always paid on time, kept the place spotless. Everyone here liked him. After he died, I never had the heart to rent the room out. It's just stayed the same. She opened the door, a small room, dimly lit, smelling faintly of fuel and smoke. Posters of motorcycles lined the walls. On the desk, an old cracked helmet and a photo frame lying face down. I turned it over. Ethan and a young woman smiling, a small child cradled in their arms. Lucas's hand trembled as he touched the photo. That's him. And the little girl. I stood frozen, feeling as though I'd stepped into a space between two worlds, where the living and the lost could still see each other. On the desk lay a leather-bound notebook. The last page was written in handwriting so familiar it hurt. If anyone finds this, tell Grace I kept my word. I didn't run. I just went looking for a place wide enough to forgive myself. I closed the notebook, my chest tightening. Lucas looked at me, his voice rough. He still remembered you. I didn't speak. I just nodded. The tears came before I noticed. Back at the hotel, we sat for hours in silence, each of us alone with our memories, the only sound the tick of the clock. Lucas held the notebook, lips moving as he read line after line. I used to be jealous of myself, he murmured. Jealous of the man with this face who got to live the real life. But now I understand. We both lost. Ethan lost his life. And I lost my roots. But you have something he never did, I said softly. A chance to go on. He looked at me, eyes damp but glowing with a calm light. You're right. And I'll use it to protect Lily. The next morning, we went to the foster center listed in the records. The woman in charge, a young staff member with short hair and a kind voice, checked the files. Lily Cole? She said, scanning the papers. She's been here since she was 2. Her mother disappeared and no one knows who her father was. She's a sweet kid, loves to draw, keeps to herself. She led us to the play area. A small girl with curly brown hair was drawing on the pavement with colored chalk. When she lifted her head, I froze. Those eyes, hazel brown, deep and clear, were Ethan's. Lucas stopped short. He tried to smile, but his lips trembled. "Hi there," he said gently. "What are you drawing?" "The ocean," Lily said. "Daddy said the ocean can hear your wishes." My throat tightened. A 3-year-old still remembered her father through her faith in the waves. Lucas crouched beside her, taking her small hand in his. She didn't flinch, just tilted her head, studying him for a moment before smiling. "You look like my daddy." I turned away, tears blurring my vision. Lucas pressed his lips together, leaned forward, and touched his forehead to hers. "Maybe. Because I used to be a part of him." That evening, after Lily had gone back to her room, Lucas and I stood in the hallway. "You lost your brother," I said. "But you found the most important part of him." "Yeah," he murmured. "A part of Ethan is still here. In her. In you. And in me." The night wind drifted through the open window, carrying the faint scent of lavender from the courtyard. I saw Lucas lift his gaze to the sky, his expression calm in a way I'd never seen before. Maybe, in that moment, he truly believed what I'd always hoped, that love never disappears. It only moves somewhere else to keep on living. I never used to believe in destiny, or at least, I thought I didn't, until I saw Lily. She stood in the middle of the playground, sunset spilling honey-colored light across her hair, smiling at us with a joy that made my heart twist. A child unaware that she was proof of a story that was supposed to have ended. A gift from the universe, reminding us that no loss is ever absolute. When Lucas bent down, his trembling hand brushing Lily's curls, I realized that moment had changed him forever. The man who once hid behind the cold armor of success was now just an older brother trying to gather the scattered pieces of his family. "Do you believe it?" Lucas asked softly, as if afraid to break the fragile air between us. "Believe what?" "That sometimes what we're searching for isn't lost at all. It's only moved somewhere else, so we have to learn how to see differently." I didn't answer. I only squeezed Lily's small, warm hand, faintly dusted with chalk. The next day, we went back to the foster center. The social worker greeted us with cautious eyes, but when Lucas handed her the genetic records from Margaret Langford's files, her tone turned serious. "You're the child's only living relative?" "Yes. My brother, Ethan Cole, was her father. I'd like to apply for visitation and guardianship." She nodded and set a thick file on the table. "We'll need to review it, but if the DNA confirms the relationship, you'll be prioritized for custody. However, are you ready for that? It's not a small responsibility." Lucas looked at me. In his eyes, I saw both fear and resolve. "I'm ready," he said. "I don't want her to grow up not knowing where she belongs." The social worker smiled. "Sometimes a sentence like that is enough." The first official visit with Lily took place on a drizzly afternoon. The room was small, filled with toys and drawings, bright suns, flowers, and crooked houses that looked straight out of a fairy tale. When Lucas entered, Lily was coloring a butterfly. She looked up, smiled, and asked, "You came again?" "Yes, I came to see you." "Why?" "Because I'm family." Lily tilted her head, wide-eyed. "What's family?" Lucas smiled sadly. "It's the place you can always return to no matter how far you go." I turned away, hiding a wet smile. Some sentences, meant for a child, are powerful enough to heal an adult who's been lost for years. Weeks later, the DNA results arrived. Lucas and I opened the envelope together. The bold letters at the bottom of the page froze him in place. Result confirmed. Lucas Langford and Lily Cole share a biological relationship, 99.98%. He sank into the chair, covering his face. I sat beside him, feeling my heart beat in rhythm with his breaths. A part of Ethan was watching us through Lily's eyes. I couldn't save Ethan, Lucas whispered, his voice breaking. But I can protect his daughter. Not can, I said, quietly. Will. He turned to me. That look, deep, steady, and warm, was enough to make me feel like I might dissolve. When we saw Lily again, we were allowed to take her out for the day. I chose the lakeside park, the one with the wooden carousel and rows of red maple trees. Lily ran ahead, her tiny feet crunching through the fallen leaves. Careful, Lily, Lucas called. I know. She laughed, waving a paper butterfly. Daddy said the wind is the butterfly's best friend. I froze. Daddy said. Two simple words that went straight through me. Lucas stopped too, lips pressed tight, eyes glimmering. He knelt down and opened his arms. Come here, sweetheart. Lily ran into him, laughing like sunlight. In that instant, I saw a complete picture. No longer Lucas or Ethan, just one man learning how to be a father with everything he had left. That night, we drove Lily back to the center. She yawned, clutching her paper butterfly, and fell asleep in the car. Lucas watched her through the mirror, his voice low. Do you think we're doing the right thing? There's no such thing as absolutely right, I said. But some things, even if they're wrong to the world, are right to the heart. He smiled faintly, then said suddenly, I'm going to adopt her, even if I have to give up everything. Are you sure? I asked. Olivia, your job, your family. He shook his head. None of that matters. I used to have everything, but none of it was real. Now I just want to hold on to the one thing that makes me feel alive, this little girl. I was silent. For the first time, I saw a man willing to give up an entire world for something that had no name but love. On the day the adoption was approved, it rained lightly. Lily wore a white dress and hugged a fabric doll to her chest. When the social worker signed the papers, she ran to Lucas and asked, Can I call you Dad? Lucas didn't even manage a word. He only nodded, tears falling into her hair. I watched them, my heart melting in a warmth that was both sweet and painful. The social worker turned to me with a smile. The child seems very close to you. Who are you to her? I hesitated, glancing at Lucas. He answered for me, voice gentle but certain. She's family. That night, Lucas and I brought Lily home, to my small apartment, now filled with light. I cooked our first dinner together. Lily sang as Lucas adjusted her high chair. Afterward, when the dishes were done, she reached out, her little fingers brushing mine. Miss Grace, are you my mom? I froze. The world went silent. I looked at Lucas. He gave a small nod, not commanding, just inviting. I bent down, wiped a smudge of chocolate from her cheek, and smiled. No, sweetheart. But if you'd like, I can be your mom, in whatever way you need me to be. Lily studied me for a moment, then wrapped her tiny arms around my neck. Mom. I felt my heart shatter. Not from pain, but from being mended. Lucas stood nearby, quiet. When I looked up at him, his eyes shimmered in the lamplight, filled with something tender and aching, like he knew that from this moment on, everything inside him had changed forever. He whispered, almost to himself, We can't leave her behind. Not again. No matter what it costs. I nodded. Then we won't leave anyone behind. Outside, the rain had stopped. A sliver of new moon, thin as the crescent scar on Ethan's neck, hung above the city. I looked at it and felt certain of one thing. The universe truly does have strange, miraculous ways of finishing what was left undone. If there's one thing I've learned from years of working as a paramedic, it's this. The calmest moments always come right before a storm. And ours began on a morning that looked perfectly ordinary. I woke earlier than usual. Lucas was still asleep, his arm wrapped around me, while Lily curled up in her small blanket inside the cradle beside the bed. The dim morning light slipped through the curtain and fell across their faces. One face, 2 generations, the same brown eyes. I sat up, watching them quietly, overwhelmed by a feeling I had never truly dared to believe in before. Peace. But peace is the most fragile thing on earth. It only takes a single word, a single call, or a single familiar name to shatter it. At noon, while I was dropping Lily off at preschool, a black Bentley pulled up in front of the gate. The window rolled down, revealing the cold, imperious face of Charles Langford. Sunlight struck his eyes, the kind of eyes used to giving orders, never asking for anything. "Miss Turner," he said, his voice sharp and precise as a blade. "I've finally found you." I stepped in front of Lily, forcing calm into my tone. "What do you want from me?" "What's mine?" he replied, his stare hard with contempt. "Including Lucas." My hand tightened around Lily's. My pulse pounded in my throat. "You're wrong. Lucas doesn't belong to anyone. You lost that right the moment you chose to lie." For a second, a thin smile touched his lips. Cold. Cutting. "Lie? You think you understand Lucas better than I do? You're just a lonely woman trying to fill a hole in her life. Don't fool yourself into thinking you can change the game." I could feel the eyes of the other parents turning toward us, curious, whispering. Shame, fear, and anger all surged up inside me at once. "If you truly loved him," I said, my voice trembling but steady, "you wouldn't have built his life on someone else's grave." Charles leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing. "You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Turner. This world isn't kind to those who dig up its secrets." Then he shut the car door. The Bentley rolled away, leaving behind a thin trail of smoke and a heart heavy with dread. Lily looked up at me, eyes wide with innocence. "Mom, who was that man?" I knelt down and brushed her hair back. "Just a grown-up who never learned how to say sorry, sweetheart." That night, I told Lucas everything. He froze, his expression darkening. "I knew he'd come," he said hoarsely. "For my father, love is just a tool. Anything he can't control is a threat." "And what are we to him now?" I asked. He gave a weary, broken smile. "A stain that needs erasing." The words sent a chill through me. Before I could reply, his phone began to ring. The screen lit up with one name, Olivia. He hesitated. I nodded. "Answer it." Her voice came through sharp and brittle, trembling with pain. "Lucas, where are you? The press is all over this. You, the child, that woman, Grace Turner. Your father is furious. You're destroying your career." Lucas closed his eyes, gripping the phone. "Olivia, I can't come back." "You're insane," she shouted. "You're throwing away everything you built." "No," he said quietly. "I'm saving what's left of me." There was silence on the line, then the faint sound of her crying. "Is she worth it, Lucas? That woman? Worth your whole life?" I listened in silence, my chest aching. Lucas's voice cracked when he answered. "She didn't take anything from me. She just showed me I never really had anything real to begin with." When the call ended, the room fell still. Lucas sat down, covering his face with both hands. "I never wanted to hurt anyone," he whispered, "but I can't go back to the grave I crawled out of." I rested my hand on his shoulder. No one deserves to be buried like that. Not Ethan. Not you. He looked up at me, eyes heavy but shining. 2 days later, everything exploded. The headlines spread across every site. Langford CEO vanishes with paramedic. Lucas Langford, scandal or salvation? The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters camped outside. Some even followed Lily's route to school. Fear gripped me. I wouldn't let Lucas leave the house. That night, after I'd tucked Lily into bed, Lucas came in holding an envelope. "My resignation letter," he said softly. "I've sent the original to the board. I'm leaving Langford Group." I stared at him, my pulse quickening. "Are you sure? This means cutting ties forever." "I've been tied up for 10 years, he said. "Now I'm just cutting the last string." He set the envelope on the table, beside his old wedding ring. "This should end too." I wanted to speak, but my throat closed up. I understood. He wasn't walking away from people. He was walking toward himself. The next morning, we packed to leave the city. Lucas sold his luxury car, gathered what money we had, and I quit my job at the clinic. We loaded our belongings into an old SUV. Lily sat in the back seat hugging her teddy bear, blissfully unaware that this was anything more than a road trip. As we crossed the bridge, Seattle faded into mist. I watched the buildings blur into their reflections on the water, a quiet ache mixing with relief in my chest. Lucas gripped the wheel. "Do you regret it?" I shook my head. "I've lost more than this before. Now I just want to keep what's right." He smiled faintly. "Charles won't let this go." "Then let him chase," I said, eyes on the road ahead. "There are things he'll never reach. True love, truth itself, and faith." At dusk, we stopped at a roadside rest area. Lucas sat on the steps, watching Lily play with pebbles. "I used to think revenge was the only way to survive," he murmured. "But now I know. Forgiveness is the only revenge power can't buy." I sat beside him, resting my head on his shoulder. "Forgiveness isn't forgetting, Lucas. It's choosing to keep living, even when the past is still there." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where the sun was sinking slowly behind the mountains. "I never knew what freedom smelled like," he said softly. "Now I do. It smells like wind, dust, and you." I smiled, fingers intertwining with his. In that hand, I could feel a new heartbeat, not of fear or regret, but of a man stepping into the second life he was meant to have. Behind us, Lily shouted, "Daddy! Mommy! Look! A rainbow!" We turned. A faint arc of color curved across the gray sky. My eyes stung as a quiet certainty rose in me. Maybe, after everything, we were finally heading the right way. At that same moment, back in Seattle, inside the vast office of Langford Group, Charles Langford stood at the window, staring out over the city. He lifted his phone, his voice cold as steel. "Find out who Grace Turner really is. Everything. Her past, her family, her secrets. I want it all." Outside, the rain began to fall. Thunder rolled across the sky like a warning. A new storm was coming, and this time, it wouldn't just come for Lucas, it would come for me. We stopped in a small seaside town on the northern coast of Oregon, where the wind carried both the scent of salt and pine. At first, I didn't know what to call this place, a stopover or the beginning of a new life, but Lily called it home, and somehow, that was enough. The little rented house sat tucked beneath a hill, its wooden roof faded by years of wind and sun, its windows looking out toward the sea. Every morning, Lily ran barefoot on the sand, laughing as if she had never known a dark day. Lucas taught her how to skip stones, counting each ripple across the water. And I just watched them, sometimes afraid that it was all a dream, that I would wake up alone again. But whenever Lucas turned back to smile at me, I believed this time it was real. One afternoon, I got a call from Margaret Langford. Her voice was soft but trembling. "Grace, it's me. I know you've gone. I don't blame you, but I'd like to see Lily. Just once." I was silent for a long moment, my chest heavy. "Are you sure? Charles?" "Charles doesn't know," she cut in, her tone steady. "I need to do this before it's too late." I understood. Some wounds can only heal when they're faced. The next afternoon, Margaret arrived. She wore a long coat, her hair neatly pinned, her face more tired than I remembered. When Lily ran to the door, Margaret's smile broke open like winter sunlight. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hand trembling as she touched the child's cheek. "These eyes, they're Ethan's." Lucas stood beside her, silent. I watched them, and in that small room, something invisible began to mend, wordlessly, honestly. Margaret knelt down and hugged Lily tight. She cried. A real cry, stripped of pride and guilt. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for what the grown-ups did." Lily didn't understand. She just touched Margaret's tears and said, "Don't cry, Grandma, I'm okay." I turned away, hiding my tears. That innocent line, to me, it was the purest form of forgiveness. That evening, Margaret stayed for dinner. She told us about the years after the fire, how she lived with the silence, how Charles forced her to keep it for the family's reputation. "I told myself that silence was love," she said quietly. "But the truth is, it was cowardice." Lucas took her hand, his voice breaking. "I forgive you, Mom. You don't have to make it up to anyone. Just being here is enough." Margaret smiled through her tears. She looked at me, warmly, gently, in a way I never thought possible. "Thank you, Grace. You pulled my son out of that house and brought him back to life." I replied softly, "Sometimes, to save someone, you have to let go of everything safe." She nodded, as if she knew exactly what that meant. The next day, we went to the lawyer's office to file for Lily's guardianship. The stark black print on the white paper made my hands tremble. On the desk, our family photo sat atop the documents, proof that what we had wasn't a tragedy, but a family. The lawyer looked up and smiled. "This family," he said, "is something special. Not because of your past, but because of the way you look at one another. There's truth in that. And that's the rarest thing in the world." I glanced at Lucas. He squeezed my hand, his eyes calm and certain, filled with a quiet faith I had never seen before. Weeks later, a letter from the court arrived. My hands shook as I opened it. "Petition for guardianship of minor, Lily Cole, approved." I exhaled, sinking into the chair. Lucas pulled me into his arms, laughing, a rare, unguarded laugh. Lily ran over, confused. "What is it, Mommy? Why's Daddy laughing?" I hugged her, whispering through my tears. "Because now, sweetheart, you really have a home." Her eyes sparkled. "So we're not leaving anymore?" "No, my love. We're staying." Lucas lifted her up, spinning her around as laughter filled the house. Margaret stood in the doorway, her eyes shining, the look of someone finally cleansed of her sins. I stood there, listening to the sound of their laughter, and felt my own heart beating in rhythm with theirs. 3 heartbeats, 1 harmony, family. That night, after Lily fell asleep, I walked down to the beach. Waves rolled in softly. The wind tangled my hair with salt and memory. Lucas came up behind me, draping his jacket over my shoulders. "I used to think my life ended in that Langford mansion," he said quietly. "But endings, they're just beginnings in disguise." I leaned on his shoulder. "Forgiveness doesn't change the past," I said. "It changes how we see it." He nodded, eyes distant but peaceful. "I'm going to see Charles," he said, "for the last time. I don't want anger anymore. I just want it to end." with truth. I didn't stop him. I knew it was the final step he needed to be free. A week later, Lucas returned from Seattle. His face was calm, his eyes light. "What did you say to him?" I asked. "Not much," he replied. "Just, I forgive you, Father." I said nothing. Tears fell before I even noticed. Lucas smiled, a gentle, heartbreaking smile. "Forgiveness isn't to set him free," he said. "It's to let me live." I held him close, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart. Outside, the waves kept rolling in, slow, deep, steady, like the breathing of the sea, of peace we had finally earned. Margaret left the next morning. Before she went, she handed me a small letter. "Thank you, Grace. You gave me back both of my sons, one by blood and one by love. Take care of Lily. Let her grow without the shadows that haunted her parents." I folded the letter and pressed it to my chest. Outside, Lucas was helping Lily water the plants. She squealed with delight as a tiny rosebud bloomed on the bush we had planted our first day here. Watching them, I felt something open in my chest. No more fear, no more hate. Just life, just tenderness, just a light I finally believed I deserved. That night, when everything was still, I wrote in my journal, "At last, we are home, not a place with a roof, but a place where our hearts no longer wander." Ethan, if you're somewhere out there, know this. I found you. In Lucas, in Lily, and in myself. The night breeze drifted through the window carrying salt and the faint scent of roses. I smiled and closed my eyes, letting my heart drift with the tide. In my dream, I saw Ethan standing on the far shore, smiling. Behind him, the sun was rising. And I knew then, we had all been forgiven. A year has passed since the day we left Seattle. Sometimes I still jolt awake in the middle of the night, mistaking the rain outside the window for the wail of an ambulance siren, or the light seeping through the curtain for the flames of that old fire. But then I hear Lily laughing in her sleep, and Lucas turns over and gently pulls me into his arms. And in that moment, I know. Every shadow eventually retreats. Our life now is simple to the point of strangeness. A small house by the sea, white painted walls, a wooden roof bleached by the salty wind. Each morning I make coffee, listen to the waves, and watch Lucas carry Lily on his shoulders, both of them laughing as they walk along the sand. No more tailored suits, no luxury cars or press conferences. Lucas wears t-shirts now, earth under his fingernails, his eyes soft as he plants flowers with our little girl. And I, the one who used to run from memory, now find myself happy to be trapped in a single quiet moment like this. Sometimes I still think of Margaret. She writes every few months, says very little, just asks about Lily, and always ends with the same familiar line. "Thank you, Grace. Because of you, I can look back at the past without fear." I know she's living peacefully on a small farm in Northern California. As for Charles Langford, the man who once terrified us with a single look, he quietly stepped down from his position at the corporation. The papers said it was for his health, but I know the truth. He lost, not on the trading floor, but in the fight to reclaim his own soul. That spring, I found out I was pregnant. My first feeling wasn't joy, but fear. I sat on the bathroom floor, hands shaking around the stick with 2 lines, mind blank. A doctor had told me long ago that my body might not be able to be a mother. And yet now, when I had stopped expecting it, it came. Gently, quietly, like light seeping through a crack in the door. I kept it from Lucas for one day, just to savor the miracle by myself. That evening, while he was reading to Lily, I laid a hand on my belly and whispered, "Little one, I've been waiting for you for such a long time." The next morning, I told him, Lucas froze, his eyes widening as if he couldn't believe it. Say it again. I'm pregnant, Lucas. He stepped forward and held me tight, breath quick, his hands trembling. My God. Grace, you're a miracle. Then he placed his palm on my stomach and listened, as though he could catch the tiny heartbeat within. I swear I won't let anyone hurt you, he said softly. Not ever again. When Lily heard, she hopped up and down like a sparrow. I'm going to be a big sister. I'll teach the baby to sing and to draw rainbows. I burst out laughing, and Lucas stood watching the two of us, his eyes shimmering like someone who had touched something sacred. Our new life arrived like another test of fate. Lucas opened a small shop at the foot of the hill where he sells honey, scented candles, and coffee. He roasts himself. I help him in the mornings, and in the afternoons I work as a nurse at the town clinic. At night, we gather around our little wooden table for simple dinners filled with laughter. We don't need more. We once lost everything, and from those ashes we learned that the truly precious thing isn't money or power, but the quiet ease of seeing the person you love still there beside you. Once, while we were tidying the garden, Lucas said, I used to think happiness meant having everything. Now I know happiness only needs enough. I smiled and answered, and sometimes enough is just someone who stays when everything else is gone. One afternoon, while Lily was drawing on the porch, the postman brought an unmarked envelope. Inside was a photo. Me, Lucas, and Lily, taken from a distance. On the back, a short line. Keep this good thing. M. I smiled softly. I knew it was Margaret. She didn't need to say more. I understood. She was watching over us, from afar, in peace. In June, the sunsets over the sea were breathtaking. We walked with Lily along the pier. She picked up seashells, slipped them into her pocket, then turned and said, Mom, every shell is a wish. I'm going to wish that our family will stay together forever. I bent down, stroked her hair, and smiled through tears. Your wish has already come true, Lily. Lucas took my hand, and the three of us walked under the golden light. I looked up to see the sky shift from orange to violet, the sea glinting like a giant mirror reflecting everything we had lost, loved, and forgiven. At the end of the pier, a figure stood waiting. It was Charles Langford. He wore a dark coat, his gait slow, weary. When he saw Lily, he faltered. This little girl, she has Ethan's eyes. His voice trembled, no arrogance left in it. I held my breath. Lucas took a step forward, but I gently held him back. Charles bent down, picked up a shell Lily had dropped, and placed it in her hand. Keep it, little one. The sea never keeps anything for itself, so you shouldn't keep hatred either. Lily smiled and thanked him. Charles looked up at us. In his eyes there was no power anymore, only fatigue and regret. I've lost too much, he said quietly. But perhaps, in the end, you are the ones who understand the true value of family. Then he turned and walked away, his figure shrinking into the blood-red sunset. Lucas squeezed my hand and asked softly, Are you afraid he'll come back? I shook my head. No, because this time, he left with a human heart. That night I sat alone on the porch. The sea breeze blew through, salt thick in the air. I took out my notebook and wrote, Lily saved me, not the other way around. She taught me that forgiveness isn't erasing the past, but learning to keep living even while it remains. I used to think love was a consuming fire. Now I understand it's a steady glow, just warm enough that we no longer fear the dark. I set down my pen and looked out. The night waves rolled in. Above, the full moon shone like the bright scar on Ethan's neck, a sign of an old story that no longer hurts. I gently laid my hand on my belly, where the baby stirred and smiled. Little one, When you are born, I'll tell you this story. Not so you'll know who was right or wrong, but so you'll understand this. True love doesn't rescue us from pain. It teaches us to walk bravely through it. I lifted my gaze toward the sunrise beginning to bloom offshore. The day's first light touched my cheek. Warm, gentle, filling me with a feeling I can only name with 2 words. Peace. Found. In the end, I realized, the greatest revenge isn't making someone suffer the way you once did, but living a life so peaceful they can no longer touch you. I've walked through deceit, loss, and wounds I thought would never heal, only to understand this. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's letting go of the wrong person so you can hold on to yourself. If you've ever known pain like Grace's, a love left unfinished, a trust betrayed, tell me, what would you choose? Revenge or forgiveness? Leave your answer below. Perhaps, somewhere among those words, we'll find a way to heal ourselves.